TaxAct knows filing taxes can be confusing, so we have live experts on hand who can help answer any questions you may have. Questions like, can I claim my SUV as my home office if I answer work emails in my car? If I adopted 12 dogs this year, can I list them as dependents? And, am I doing this right, or am I doing this very, very wrong? Our experts have the answers to those questions and many others. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Excuse me! Taxi! What are you doing? This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, tomorrow will be a huge day at the Supreme Court. Birthright citizenship is going to be taken up. Explain, first of all, what a huge deal this will be, and what do you think we're going to hear tomorrow?
Well, let's start first with birthright citizenship. One of the dumbest things the framers of the Constitution ever put into the 14th Amendment. Why should anybody be a citizen of this country if they happen to have been born while their parents were vacationing here? They've never been in the country. They don't speak the language. They don't know anything about America. But if you were born here, you're not a citizen. And if you were not born here, it's a ridiculous law, but it's the law. And so the Supreme Court has to figure out a way around it. I don't think they're going to come to the argument sympathetic to birthright citizenship, which I think no reasonable person can really defend the way it's being used. I suspect they're going to come to a balanced conclusion. They're going to say, look, it's in the Constitution. We can't stop it. It's in the Constitution to be born in this country and subject to its jurisdiction. You're a citizen. But maybe the legislature, maybe even the president, can make a ruling saying that people who are just born in the country for a moment and have no connection to the country are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and therefore don't fit within the 14th Amendment. I think that's a possible out.
So that's interesting. Judge Weinberg, what do you think?
I think the professor's is right. It's a very good argument. Also, Alan, it's also very clear it was never intended to reach the population of the world that comes here as tourists. It was deliberately intended to be one of the amendments coming out of the Civil War. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. But what I'm a little worried about is that his lawyer, who's a very good lawyer, the Solicitor General, who I assume will be arguing the case, did not do a good job on the tariffs, made the wrong argument, and the case could have easily been won, the tariff case, had the Solicitor General just said, Your Honors, I want to point you to a possible war that could have taken place between India and Pakistan in which 10 million people could have been killed. The president used the tariff power to stop that war. That is a presidential power. It is not a tax. It is a power given by the Constitution to the executive to be used diplomatically and militarily. They would have won if they made that argument. But instead, they said it's a tax. And, of course, if it's a tax, the House of Representatives has to pass on it. They're the ones who raise the revenue. So I'm concerned. I don't know. I'm going to watch the argument very carefully tomorrow, obviously. I haven't read the briefs, so I don't know whether or not they're going to make the right argument that Congress or the president has the power to define who's under the jurisdiction of the United States.
Judge Weinberg?
And Alan, the Supreme Court just came out with a very good decision on the PLO judgment, sustaining the PLO judgment, saying there's a viable cause of action for terrorism that resulted in death and injury to the victims of that terrorism. That case went on for a long period of time until they were vindicated, but this is a big victory. What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, no, I actually gave a little advice on the case right from the beginning, and I've been following it very carefully. Of course, and now, we now know that Hezbollah was, at least morally and according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, legally responsible for the attack on the synagogue in the Detroit area. And so I think, this is being vindicated. I mean, terrorism in the United States or even abroad is the responsibility of these groups like the PLO or Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine or Hamas or Hezbollah, the Houthis, and they have to be held responsible anywhere in the world. So I am very, very happy that the court seems to be moving in that direction.
Professor Dershowitz, I'm this story I'm up in arms over today. I'm so upset about this story. And it triggered it when you talked about Michigan. This Michigan Democrat. His name is Abdul El Said. He's running for the U.S. Senate seat there in Michigan. And again, as you just pointed out, I know John's praying because wait till you hear this. This guy, and he's running, for the major seat there. Democrat. He got on audio tape said, we don't want to talk about the death of Al Khomeini, the supreme leader, what happened there in Iran, because it will upset a lot of my constituents are sad about the death of the Ayatollah. I mean, he is running. What is so wrong with our country that there are people who wouldn't be cheering for the death of the leader of a regime like that. And also that this guy is trying to downplay it. And then when the media came out with it, he called it a distraction, telling them to try to ignore it. This guy's is he running for a seat in Iran, or is he running in America?
Rita, forgive me for interrupting, but I just hope he gets the nomination.
Well, there are a lot of people who feel that way. But, what's happening to the Democratic Party is so disgraceful. As a person who was a member of the Democratic Party since I was 14 years old, it left me, and I am now working so hard to see it defeated in the midterms and in the 28 election, and it's because of people like that. I live right near Yorktown, where in the 1930s, thousands of Americans wearing swastikas and brown shirts marched to Madison Square Garden and cheered for Adolf Hitler. And so there are crazy people everywhere in every generation. But the idea of people living in Michigan, and we know it's true, cheering for murderers, terrorists, rapists, and having somebody who's campaigning for office kind of defend them is a new low. And I would hope the voters of Michigan, most of whom are decent, would reject that kind of extremism. But if they don't, then the Democratic Party will continue its drift toward the extreme left. The Republicans are doing a slightly better job, not a good enough job, but a slightly better job in marginalizing the neo-fascist extreme right, as represented by Tucker Carlson and a handful of others who get a lot of attention from the media, but who are not as central to the Republican Party as these radicals are to the Democratic Party.
No, that's a great point. Judge Weinberg.
And in Michigan, we're very fortunate because you have Congressman Mike Rogers, who's chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's running for the United States Senate. He'll be the Republican nominee. He's a great man. He's a great patriot. He understands national security, and we'll be lucky to have Rogers in the Senate.
And then you got this guy in the same race.
Well, listen, my money is on Mike Rogers. He's a wonderful man. He'll be a great senator.
Wonderful men these days don't necessarily have an edge over terrible men when you're working about elections. Today, it's very, very dangerous, and we saw what happened all over the world, and it's happening.
Look
at
this
Europe,
guy in Maine with the swastikas on his body with the tattoos.
Yeah.
No, that's your Democratic candidate.
Yeah. No, it's terrible. It's terrible, whether it's Democrat or Republican. We have thrived for 250 years as a centrist country. We've always rejected, sometimes it took us time, but we always rejected the extremes of communism and fascism. That's how we survived the 30s, whereas so many other countries didn't. And I'm hoping that we will begin again to move toward the center and thrive as a centrist country where conservative centrists and liberal centrists can talk to each other without screaming and without calling for what happened last week in the demonstration in New York, where communists were wearing with red sickle and hammer flags were calling for a revolution in the end of America, and people were applauding them. That's not America.
It is not America. Thank you very much, guys. Anything else? Any other final
I just want to say,
thoughts?
Professor, you hit it right on the head. The Democratic Party that we all knew years ago doesn't exist anymore. That Democratic Party is dead.
Well, I have a new book out today, literally today. It's called Could President Trump Constitutionally Run for a Third Term? And I lay out all the arguments constitutionally on both sides. But I have to tell you, if the alternative is some of these clowns, some of these real neo-Nazi fascists, a lot of Americans will say better a third-term Trump than a first-term Nazi.
Yeah.
And so read my book, and you'll see the arguments on both sides, and you'll see how it's possible for a second-term president, whether it's President Clinton or President Obama or President Bush, how the 22nd Amendment has a loophole as big as the new White House ballroom, which the courts today have held up. But there's a gaping hole in the 22nd Amendment, which would permit, under certain circumstances, a two-term president from running for a third term.
And real quick, what's the name of the book since it just came out, Professor?
It's on Amazon, because left-wing bookstores won't carry it. It's called "Could President Trump Constitutionally Serve a Third Term?"
Good, perfect timing.
And,
Thank you, Professor. We love having you.
Thanks. Be well.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.